Have you ever had one of those moments where you were just absolutely convinced you were the hero of the story? I mean, you followed the logic, you put in all the effort.
Oh, yeah.
You even added a little extra something, just to show how committed you were, only to have someone look at you and say, you completely missed the point.
Oh, that is a total gut punch. It's that specific sinking feeling where you realize you followed the letter of your own logic, but you completely violated the spirit of what was actually asked of you.
Exactly. And that tension between just, checking a box and actually understanding the assignment, that's really the heartbeat of today's deep dive. We are unpacking the source stack for Monday, January 19, 2026.
Right. For those of you tracking the liturgical calendar, it's the Monday of the second week in ordinary time. And usually, ordinary time kind of implies a settling in, a routine. But looking at these texts, there's absolutely nothing routine about them.
No, it's a collision. We have this massive, bloody confrontation from Israel's history in 1 Samuel, a poetic takedown of hypocrisy in Psalm 50, and then we just land on these new wine metaphors in Mark chapter 2.
It's a lot.
Yeah, so our mission today is to connect these ancient texts and figure out why new wine destroys old wineskins and why obedience is so much more valuable than sacrifice.
It's a fascinating stack because that Old Testament reading, it feels incredibly harsh to modern ears. At first glance, it really looks like a story about a God who is just angry about livestock. But when you layer with the gospel, you see this through line. It's about the container of your life, your heart, and what happens when you try to force new life into an old, rigid structure.
Okay, so let's start with the heavy hitter. 1 Samuel chapter 15, we're dealing with Saul, the first king of Israel. And honestly, reading this, Saul seems like he's trying to be a good guy here.
He really does.
At least at first. He's coming back from war, he's victorious, and he thinks he's done a good job.
And that's what makes this whole thing such a compelling tragedy. Saul isn't acting out of pure malice. He's acting out of compromise. He actually thinks he can improve on God's plan.
So let's set the context. The command from the Lord through the prophet Samuel was the ban of destruction regarding the Amalekites. And that's a tough concept for us today.
It is, yeah. This is a concept of harem. In the ancient context, this was a divine judgment, not a looting expedition. That distinction is so vital. The instruction was total destruction. No spoils of war.
So nothing.
Nothing. You don't keep the gold. You don't keep the livestock. You don't take prisoners. It's a total renunciation of profiting from the battle. You are acting as an instrument of judgment, not some conqueror looking for a payout.
Okay. So Saul goes to battle, he wins, and he comes back. Samuel shows up to check in, and Saul greets him with this incredible confidence. The text even says he set up a monument for himself.
Which is a bit of a red flag right there.
Yeah. And then he says to Samuel, "Blessed be you to the Lord. I have performed the commandment of the Lord."
He really believes it.
That's the scary part. He's delusional. Because even as he's saying, "I obeyed," Samuel can literally hear the sheep bleating in the background.
Right.
Saul has spared King Agag as a trophy, probably to parade him around, and he's kept the best of the livestock.
And when Samuel calls him out on it, on the noise, "What is this bleating of sheep in my ears?" Saul pivots to his defense. And this is where it gets so nuanced.
Yes.
Saul admits he took the sheep, but he argues he did it for a religious purpose. He says the people spared the best of the sheep to sacrifice to the Lord your God in Gilgal.
And you notice the deflection there. The people took them, and it's for the Lord your God, not my God. But the core issue is the justification. Saul's trying to negotiate the terms of his obedience.
Right.
He thinks, okay, I didn't destroy them like you said, but I'm going to use them for this huge worship service. God will love that as a value add. He's substituting a religious gesture for actual compliance. He thinks the sacrifice giving God something valuable outweighs the disobedience.
Right.
He's basically saying, look, I know I broke the rules, but look how generous I'm being with the proceeds.
And Samuel just shatters that logic completely. This is where we get one of the most pivotal lines in the entire Old Testament. He says, "Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice."
Obedience is better than sacrifice. We hear that and we nod, but let's drill down. Why? I mean, sacrifice feels like you're giving something up. It feels harder.
It feels harder, but it's transactional. Sacrifice in Saul's mind was something he could control. He sets the terms. I give you the sheep, you give me favor. Obedience is relational. It's about submission. It requires you to acknowledge you aren't the one writing the rules. You're just listening.
And Samuel takes this critique to a terrifying level. He doesn't just call it a mistake or a lapse in judgment. He compares Saul's religious act to witchcraft.
That is the line that just stalks you cold.
Yeah, the text says, "For rebellion is as the sin of divination, and presumption is as iniquity and idolatry." Now, that seems like a massive escalation. How is keeping some sheep for a barbecue the same as practicing dark magic?
Well, you have to look at the mechanics of divination or witchcraft in the ancient world. What is it, fundamentally? It's an attempt to manipulate supernatural forces to get what you want.
Okay, it's about control.
It's seeking control apart from God's will. It's saying, I want to determine the outcome.
So when Saul decides he has a better plan than God's command, I'll save these sheep because it makes more sense to me, he's elevating his own will above God's.
Exactly. He's acting as his own God. And that is the absolute essence of idolatry. He isn't bowing down to a golden calf, but he is bowing down to his own judgment. He's saying, my logic is superior to God's command. That's self-worship.
Wow. That puts a whole new spin on the presumption is idolatry part. It's not just arrogance, it's false worship.
Yes. And he was rejected as ruler, not because he wasn't religious, he was planning a huge religious festival, but because he rejected the ruler. He wouldn't let God be God. He wanted a God he could manage.
And this idea that God isn't impressed by our stuff or our performance, it flows directly into the psalm for today, Psalm 50. It almost feels like the psalmist is picking up Samuel's microphone and walking into a courtroom.
It really does. Psalm 50 is framed as a divine lawsuit. God is literally testifying against his people.
Yeah.
And the argument is just based on simple ownership.
There's that biting sarcasm in the text that I love. God asks, "Do I eat the flesh of bulls or drink the blood of goats?" He says, "I take from your house no bullock, for every beast of the forest is mine."
The logic is just irrefutable. If you are sacrificing to God to give him something he needs, you've totally misunderstood the nature of the cosmos. It's like trying to tip a billionaire with a penny you found on his own driveway.
It's insulting, really. It implies he's dependent on you.
It implies a transaction. I give you this goat. You owe me a blessing. The psalm critiques the person who recites my statutes and talks a big game about the covenant but hates discipline and casts God's words behind them.
That sounds exactly like Saul. Reciting the statutes, I perform the commandment, while physically casting the specific instruction of the ban behind him because it was inconvenient.
It is the exact same dynamic.
What?
The external show versus the internal reality. And the psalmist calls this person wicked, not because they're an atheist, but because they're using religion as a shield against God's actual will.
So if God doesn't want the goats and he doesn't want the performance, what does the psalm say he wants?
He who offers praise as a sacrifice glorifies me. And to him that goes the right way, I will show the salvation of God. The whole shift is from the object to the posture.
Unpack praise for us here. Is it just singing songs?
No, not really. In this context, praise, or a sacrifice of thanksgiving, is a confession. It's an acknowledgement of who God is. It's saying, you are the source, I am the receiver. It's the absolute opposite of the transactional mindset. It's the upright heart that aligns with God, rather than trying to buy him off.
Okay, so this setup, the rigid, transactional old way versus the aligned heart, this crashes right into the gospel reading in Mark chapter 2. And suddenly, the whole tone shifts from a battlefield and a courtroom to a wedding.
It's a jarring transition for sure, but it's a necessary one if you want to understand the solution to Saul's problem. We find people coming to Jesus with a complaint. John the Baptist's disciples are fasting. The Pharisees are fasting. Everybody who is serious about religion is in mourning mode.
Right. They're doing the religious thing, and they ask Jesus, "Why are your disciples eating and drinking? They look like they're having a party."
They want Jesus' disciples to act like old wineskins. They want them to fit into the established protocols of how you show you're a good, pious person. Fasting was a sign of repentance, of seriousness.
And Jesus replies with a question that just reframes everything. Can the wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them?
And this is a massive identity claim. In the Old Testament, God is often described as the husband of Israel. By calling himself the bridegroom, Jesus is stepping into that role. He's saying, the wedding is now. I am here.
So the rules change.
The time changes. Fasting is an expression of longing, of waiting for God to act, or mourning sin. But if God is standing right in front of you pouring the wine, fasting is just absurd. It'd be like weeping at a wedding reception. It's not just unnecessary, it's completely inappropriate.
So it's not that fasting is bad. He even says the days will come when the bridegroom is taken away and then they will fast. But it's about recognizing the moment.
Yes.
Saul couldn't recognize the moment. He was stuck in his own plan. The Pharisees couldn't recognize the moment. They were stuck in their rituals.
And this is what leads Jesus to give us two of the most practical, almost scientific metaphors in the Gospels to explain why you can't just jam this new reality into the old structures, the cloth and the wineskins.
Okay, let's break down the physics here because I think we kind of lose the visceral nature of this since we don't patch our own clothes or ferment our own wine anymore. First, the cloth. No one sews a piece of unshrunken cloth on an old cloak.
Right. Think of a wool coat that's been washed 100 times. It's fully shrunk. The fibers are tight. It has no give left in it at all. Now imagine you have a tear in it and you patch it with a piece of raw, new wool that hasn't been treated.
Okay, so I sew it on. It looks fine for a minute, but then I walk out in the rain or, I wash it.
Exactly. The new patch gets wet and it dries. It shrinks. That's what raw wool does. But the old coat can't shrink any further, so the new patch pulls violently on the old fabric. Exactly. The tension just rips the fabric apart, and the text says the tear is made worse. The attempt to combine them destroys the integrity of the whole garment.
So you can't just patch up your old life with a little accessory of Jesus. It actually destroys the structure.
It's totally incompatible. You can't just tack grace onto a structure of legalism. But the wineskin metaphor is even more violent.
No one pours new wine into old wineskins. We're so used to glass bottles, so help us visualize the wine-scare dynamic here.
So in the ancient world, wine was stored in animal skins, usually goat skins. When a skin is fresh, it's rich in collagen. It's elastic. It can stretch.
Okay.
Now, new wine means wine that is still fermenting. It's biologically active. The yeast is eating the sugar, and it's releasing carbon dioxide. It expands a lot.
So if I put that expanding, bubbling new wine into a fresh skin, the skin stretches to accommodate the pressure. It grows with the wine.
Correct. But an old wineskin has already been stretched to its limit. Over time, it hardens. It becomes brittle. It has lost all its capacity to change shape.
So if I pour the new fermenting wine into that rigid container,
The pressure builds,
Yeah.
the gas expands, the skin cannot give, and pop, it just bursts. You lose the wine, it spills all over the ground, and you destroy the container.
this connects everything we've been talking about. Saul. Saul was an old wineskin.
He was completely rigid. He had his defined parameters. I'm the king. I'll do the sacrifice my way. I know how this all works. When the new wine of God's specific difficult command came, something that required him to let go of the spoil, to act differently than a normal king, he couldn't stretch. He broke.
And the Pharisees asking about fasting, they're holding on to the old wineskin of, this is what religion is supposed to look like.
Agreed.
They can't handle the joy of the bridegroom because it doesn't fit their rigid container.
And Jesus is saying, I am bringing new wine. The grace, the life, the presence of the kingdom, it is expanding, it is alive, it exerts pressure on your life. And if you try to hold this new life within your old habits, your old resentments, or even your old religious checklist, it won't work. You will burst.
The reflection source today links this directly to the concept of a clean heart. It quotes Psalm 51, which David wrote after his own massive failure, unlike Saul. Create in me a clean heart, O God. That clean heart is basically the fresh wineskin.
Yes, a renewed spirit. To receive the new, you can't just try to patch up the old life. You need a fundamental renewal. The reflection says it explicitly. The coming of the kingdom is not about external practices alone, but about a renewed heart. It's about being made elastic again.
But let's be honest, being an old wineskin is incredibly comfortable. I know the shape of it, I know my habits, I know my rituals, whether that's how I pray or just how I get through the workday. Asking for a new heart means I actually have to be stretched.
It requires vulnerability, and that's the scary part. Saul wasn't vulnerable. He was defensive. I did obey. I did the right thing. The upright person in the psalm, the one who praises God, is the one who is open to correction.
The reflection actually mentions that we need to let go of habits and attitudes that no longer lead me to you. That's the key, isn't it? Saul was holding on to the sheep because he thought they were an asset. He thought they were wealth, but they were actually the things separating him from God.
Precisely. What we think is our treasure, our control, our being right, our routine, that might be the very old wineskin that prevents us from receiving the new life. We hold on to our resentment because it feels like protection, but it's just rigidity.
So, bringing this all down to the pavement for Monday, we've looked at the history, the poetry, and the metaphor. What's the synthesis here? How do we not be Saul?
I think it's about checking your container. Are you approaching your life, your work, your relationships with a transactional mindset? Are you negotiating with God. I'll follow you here, but I'm keeping this part for myself.
I'll be a Christian, but don't ask me to forgive that one person. Or I'll give to charity, but don't ask me to be totally honest in my business dealings.
Right. That's the old wineskin. It's rigid. The challenge is to identify where you're resisting the stretch.
The prayer in our source material just hits this perfectly. Dear Jesus, renew my heart and spirit so that I may not resist your grace.
Resist your grace. That is such a heavy phrase. We often think of grace as this warm blanket, something soft. But here, grace is the expanding wine. It applies pressure. And we resist it because it demands we change shape.
It demands we celebrate when we want to be grumpy, like the Pharisees. Or it demands we let go of the spoil when we want to profit, like Saul.
Exactly. The joy of the bridegroom is a disruption. If you're stuck in a mindset of negativity or rigid duty, joy is actually very irritating. It breaks your wineskin. To accept the joy, you have to let go of the cynicism.
The Elu verse today from Hebrews mentions, the word of God is living and effective, able to discern reflections and thoughts of the heart. It gets inside. It expands. It finds those rigid spots.
And we have a choice. We can be Saul, justify, explain, double down on our rightness, and ultimately break. Or we can ask for the new skin. We can ask to be renewed.
And that promise is right there in the psalm. To the upright, I will show the saving power of God. It's available, but it costs us our rigidity.
It costs us our control. But the return is the life itself. It's the difference between preserving a dead ritual and participating in a living wedding feast.
So let's recap the stack before we send you off. Lesson 1, God doesn't need your stuff. He doesn't need your sacrifices if they're just a cover-up for doing what you want. He wants your listening ear.
Lesson 2, you can't put the new life of the kingdom into the old structures of your past. Mixing a little bit of Jesus with a lifestyle of control creates a tear, not a fix.
And finally, the solution is a renewed heart, a heart that is flexible, open, and ready to stretch with the new wine of the Spirit.
Which brings us to the question for the day.
We always like to leave you with something to chew on, and our source material provides a specific question that I think just cuts through all the noise. It's a question to do something.
It forces you to look at your own wineskins.
Here it is, verbatim. What old habit, mindset, or fear do I need to release today so that God can do something new in my life?
Oof. That fear part is the kicker. Usually we hold on to the old because we are terrified of the new. We fear what we can't control.
Take that question with you into your Monday, check your wineskins, and don't be afraid of the stretch. Thanks for diving in with us.
See you next time.